Welcome to the F5 Networks Advanced Web Application Firewall Demo and Exercise Series. In this exercise, we'll show how to use BIG-IP Advanced WAF to stabilize a security policy. The stabilization process encompasses both the learning and staging process. While entities, such as file types, URLs, and parameters, are still in staging and not yet enforced, the security policy is not yet stabilized. Before watching this demo, we recommend you watch BIG-IP Advanced WAF Demo 8, which covers building security policies using automatic policy building, Exercise 14, which covers learning and enforcement, and Exercise 17, which explains entity enforcement. This is an exercise which represents Demo 34 of the AWAF demo series, and it's intended for advanced level BIG-IP Advanced WAF users. For optimal viewing, we recommend using full screen mode. The environment for this demo contains 3 devices. A Windows workstation will be used for sending requests to build, and then stabilize, a new security policy. These requests will arrive at the F5 BIG-IP system, running Advanced WAF. The BIG-IP system sits in front of, and protects, the backend web application. The BIG-IP system, using its full proxy architecture, examines every request before sending them to the backend web servers. Through this process, BIG-IP Advanced WAF can build, update, and eventually stabilize a web application security policy. We'll start by creating a BIG-IP Advanced WAF security policy for the DWA web application. We'll give the policy a name. We'll leave the fundamental policy template selected, and we'll select the correct virtual server. We'll specify the web application language. And finally, we'll add a range of trusted IP addresses. By using trusted IP addresses, BIG-IP Advanced WAF will build the security policy much faster when we access and use the web application from one of the trusted IP addresses. We'll now configure some additional security policy settings using the Learning and Blocking Settings page. We'll first expand the File Types section and change the Learn New File Types option to Always. Notice that the fundamental policy template includes these settings for all file types violations. Next, we'll expand the Parameters section and change the Learn New Parameters option to Always. We'll also select the Learn, Alarm, and Block checkboxes for all parameter violations. We'll select the URL option. Using parameters at the URL level enables more granular security than using parameters at the global level. We'll select this option, which ensures that BIG-IP Advanced WAF will configure each parameter according to the data input by users. And finally, we'll select to enable the policy builder to learn qualities of integer or numeric parameters. And finally, we'll expand the URLs section and change the Learn New HTTP URLs option to Always. And we'll also select the Learn, Alarm, and Block checkboxes for all URL violations. We'll then save and apply the policy. Let's examine the current entity whitelists. On the Allowed File Types page, you can see that there are no configured file types yet. On the Allowed URLs page, there are also no configured URLs. And on the Parameters List page, there aren't yet any configured parameters. This security policy was just created, and the learning process hasn't begun, as there hasn't yet been any user traffic directed to the web application. We're now going to use an IO macro in Firefox. This iMacro simulates several requests to the DVWA web application by a user from a trusted IP address. The policy builder has learned the 10 file types needed for this web application. Notice that the wildcard entry is still in the list, as the policy builder is still learning. Also notice that each file type has full-length limit values. In addition, all the file types are still in staging. While in staging, BIG-IP Advanced WAF will not enforce the length limit value for each file type. The policy builder has also learned around 30 URLs needed for this web application. The HTTP and HTTPS wildcard entries are still in the list, and all URLs are also in staging. The policy builder has also learned several parameters, or user input fields, used in the web application. The wildcard entry is still in the list, and all parameters are still in staging. Also note that all parameters have a parameter value type of ignore value. This means that BIG-IP Advanced WAF will not yet block requests based on the values submit into these parameters. We'll select the name parameter. While a parameter has a type of ignore value, there are no other configurable attributes. Using a new private window, we'll now run the iMacro again, to simulate more user requests. On the parameters list page, we can see that all parameters now have a parameter value type of user input value. This attribute was modified by the automatic policy builder. Let's once again examine the name parameter. Now that the parameter value type has changed, there are configurable attributes. Notice that this parameter has a data type value of alphanumeric. Also notice that the maximum length has been set to 10. This isn't long enough for this parameter, so we'll wait for more traffic from the trusted workstation. Let's examine the value meta characters tab. By default, certain keyboard characters are disallowed in user input value parameters. However, some of these disallowed keyboard characters should be allowed to be input by users into this parameter, so we'll wait for more traffic from the trusted workstation. Let's select the ID parameter for the vulnerabilities/SQL URL. Notice the data type for this field was set to integer, with a maximum value of less than or equal to 10. During the staging process, the policy builder determined that users were only submitting numeric values into this parameter. This is also not a high enough maximum value, so we'll wait for more traffic from the trusted workstation. We're now going to use the learning and blocking settings page to adjust the policy builder learning speeds. At the bottom of the page, we'll view the advanced settings, and then expand the loosen policy section. These values control the number of requests and amount of time that must pass from both untrusted and trusted sources before the policy builder will learn a new policy setting. We'll lower two values. We'll then expand the Tighten Policy, Stabilize section. These values control the number of requests, and the amount of time that must pass, before the policy builder will stabilize a policy setting. We'll modify all three of these values. Finally, we'll expand the Minimize False Positives, Track Site Changes section. These values control the number of requests, and the amount of time that must pass, before the policy builder will destabilize a policy setting, based on updates to the web application. We'll first select Only from Trusted Traffic, and then lower this last value. In case you're curious, 0.0002 days is the equivalent of about 18 seconds. By modifying these values, we'll simulate policy building at a much more rapid rate. It's important to note that these settings will only affect requests coming from trusted sources. We'll now save and apply the policy. Using a new private window, we'll now run a second iMacro to simulate additional user requests. On the Allowed File Types page, you'll see several changes. The wildcard entry is no longer on the list. This means that BIG-IP Advanced WAF considers this list complete. However, it's still open to learning new file types to add to the list. The file types are no longer in staging, which means Advanced WAF will enforce the length limits for each file type. The policy builder changed the query string length limit for the NoEXT file type to 2048. This was due to user requests that exceeded the default 1000 length limit, and therefore the policy builder adjusted this attribute. On the Allowed URLs page, you can see that the wildcard entries are no longer on the list, and all URLs are now enforced. On the Parameters List page, you can see that this wildcard entry is also no longer on the list, and all parameters are now enforced. Notice that the name parameter now has a maximum length value of 500, which is a sufficient length for this parameter. This change was made based on the length of the values that were submitted using the iMacro. The policy builder added 4 meta characters as allowed characters for this parameter. Again, this was based on the values that were submitted using the iMacro. The ID parameter for the vulnerabilities/SQL URL now has a maximum value of 1024. The ID parameter for the vulnerabilities/SQL blind URL has also been identified as an integer with a maximum value of 50. We'll run the iMacro once more. But first, we'll make a couple of edits to the macro. For the 2 lines that submit values into the ID parameter for the vulnerabilities/SQL blind URL, we'll insert higher numeric values. How do you think this will affect this parameter's attributes in the security policy? We'll reload the parameters list page. The ID parameter for the vulnerabilities/SQL blind URL now has a maximum value of 1024. We'll now examine the MTX message parameter. This parameter has a maximum length value of 5000. The policy builder has added 5 meta characters as allowed characters for this parameter. On the Attack Signatures tab, you can see that there are nearly 1000 parameter level attack signatures being checked for this parameter. We'll now run a third eye macro. On the Allowed File Types page, you can see that all file types are no longer in staging, which means they are enforced. The Allowed File Types list is now stabilized. Any user requests that are longer than the configured length values will be considered illegal requests and will be blocked by BIG-IP Advanced WAF. We have decided to not keep the query string length value of 2048 for the NoEXT file type. We can manually change values set by the automatic policy builder. We'll modify this value to 1500 bytes. On the Allowed URLs page, you can see that all URLs are now enforced. The Allowed URLs list is now stabilized. Similarly, on the Parameters list page, you can see that all parameters are now enforced. The parameters list is also now stabilized. Any user requests that violate a parameter's attributes will be considered illegal requests and will be blocked by BIG-IP Advanced WAF. The name parameter's maximum length value is still 500. The policy builder has determined this to be the correct maximum length for this parameter. Notice that several meta characters are still not allowed in the parameter, including the double quotes, the $sign, the %sign, the ampersand, and the single quote. Now, let's see what happens when a request is submitted that violates a parameter's attributes. We'll log in as a non-malicious user. The field on this page is the ID parameter. We'll submit a request with an input value of 2000. The request is blocked because it violates the current maximum value attribute of the ID parameter. The field on this page is the name parameter. We'll submit this long request into the field, which is over 500 characters, and contains several keyboard characters that are currently disallowed. Again, the request is blocked because it violates the current attributes of the name parameter. The second field on this page is the MTX message parameter. We'll submit a review to the web application. The request is blocked because it contains the $sign keyboard character, which violates the current attributes of the MTX message parameter. Let's reload the parameters list page. Notice that the ID, MTX message, and name parameters are once again in staging, and not being enforced. This is because the policy builder has identified new attributes for these parameters, and put them back into staging. The ID parameter's maximum value has been increased to 16,384. The security policy is still in automatic learning, and therefore it adjusted this value, based on the request from a trusted source. The MTX message parameter now includes the $sign as an allowed meta character. The name parameter's maximum length value has been increased to 1000. Also, several new meta characters have been added to the allowed list for this parameter. Let's log in as the same user, and then try to submit the value of 2000 into the ID parameter again. Let's try to submit the long request into the name parameter again. Finally, let's try to create a review that includes a $sign. All three requests are now allowed, because the policy builder has modified the attributes of the three parameters. Notice the three parameters are still in staging. The policy builder needs more traffic before enforcing the parameters. We're now going to use a for-i macro, which simulates entering the same values we just submit, the 2000, the long text string, and the $sign. Notice that all parameters are once again out of staging, and enforced. BIG-IP Advanced WAF will now enforce their maximum values, maximum lengths, allowed meta characters, and attack signature attributes. Now that the security policy is stabilized, we'll use the security policy properties page to disable any new policy learning. Let's test the stabilized security policy. First, we'll try to access a confidential web server configuration file, the readme.md file. This malicious request is blocked by the BIG-IP Advanced WAF security policy, because this is a file type that isn't on the allowed file types list, and also a URL that isn't on the allowed URLs list. We'll now log in as a malicious user. And we'll then attempt to submit an OEXT file type request with an extremely long query string value. This malicious request is also blocked by BIG-IP Advanced WAF, because the query string length is longer than the value we configured of 1500 bytes. We'll now submit a legal value into the ID parameter. Then, we'll attempt to use the query string to add another parameter name and value. This malicious request is blocked, because this parameter isn't on the allowed parameters list. We'll submit the text string AWAF into the ID parameter. This malicious request is blocked, because we're attempting to enter a text string into an integer parameter. Next, we'll use the ID parameter for the SQLi blind URL and submit a value of 2000. This malicious request is blocked because we're attempting to enter a numeric value higher than this parameter's maximum value of 1024. We'll attempt to submit an extremely large text string into this parameter. This malicious request is blocked because we're attempting to submit an entry longer than the name parameter's maximum linked value of 1000. We'll submit a review that includes the left and right square brace characters. This malicious request is blocked because we're attempting to enter two keyboard characters into the MTX message parameter that are not on its allowed meta character list. Finally, we'll attempt to submit a review that includes a cross-site script that's been encoded. This malicious request is also blocked by the BIG-IP Advanced WAF security policy. Let's examine these blocked requests using the BIG-IP Advanced WAF event log. First, we'll filter the log file to show only blocked log entries. This request was blocked because the malicious user requested an MD file type, which is illegal. This request was blocked because the no-ext file type allows for a maximum length of 1500 bytes, and this malicious request was for 1060 bytes. This request was blocked because the malicious user attempted to submit the value of u into an illegal parameter named hack. This request was blocked because the ID parameter expects an integer data type, and this malicious user submit the value of AWAF, which is illegal. This request was blocked because the ID parameter allows a maximum value of 1024, and this malicious request was for 2000, which is illegal. This request was blocked because it violated the parameter length. The name parameter expects a maximum length of 1000, and this request was for 1004 characters. The MTX message parameter does not allow the left or right bracket keyboard characters. Even though the malicious user attempted to encode this attack, BIG-IP Advanced WAF decoded the request and identified several attack signatures present within the request. Notice in the decoded request section, you can see the attack string that was submitted after it was decoded by BIG-IP Advanced WAF. Thank you for watching this exercise on using F5 BIG-IP Advanced WAF to stabilize security policies. We encourage you to watch additional AWAF demos and exercises, and for more details on how Advanced WAF can protect your web applications, contact your F5 Networks Sales Account Manager. For questions or comments about this video, contact Chris Manley at the email address at the bottom of the page.